I'm 83 years old now, my hands shake, my back aches with every step, and my eyes don't see as clearly as they used to. But my memory, oh my memory is sharp as a blade, especially when it comes to that day. The day they laughed at me like I was nothing, like I was already dead. Just taking up space at the table. It was a warm summer afternoon in 1967. I was 32, working double shifts at the auto shop just to keep the lights on in our tiny apartment. My wife, Clara, was expecting our second child. We had no savings. No car, no family to lean on, but we had hope. And I had a dream I'd been nursing in secret for years, to open my own repair garage. Not just any shop, a place where honesty mattered more than profit. Where mechanics treated every customer like family. I'd saved every penny for 5 years. Pennies turned into dollars, dollars into a small loan from a kind-hearted neighbor who believed in me. I finally had enough to lease a small lot on the edge of town. It wasn't much, just a rusted roof, cracked concrete, and a sign that read Henderson's Honest Repairs in peeling paint. But to me, it was everything. I invited my brothers, my cousins, my old friends from the neighborhood. I wanted them to see it. Not for praise, but for witness. I wanted someone to remember that I tried. They came, not out of support, I realize now, but out of curiosity. Maybe even pity. I stood in front of that empty garage, heart pounding, sweat on my brow, and told them what I'd built. I showed them the lease, the tools I'd bought secondhand, the business license. I spoke with a voice trembling, not from fear but from pride. Then my older brother, Thomas, the one who'd always called me the dreamer with a sneer, stepped forward. He looked around, shook his head and laughed. This is your big plan? You're gonna fix cars in this junkyard while your wife pops out another mouth to feed? The others joined in. My cousin said, better go back to sweeping floors. Eddie, at least that job doesn't require brains. Someone else muttered. He'll be bankrupt in a month. Clara stood behind me, silent, her hand on her belly. I could feel her shame like a cold wind. Not because she doubted me, but because she hurt for me. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I just nodded, thanked them for coming, and walked them out. That night, after Clara fell asleep, I sat on the porch and cried for the first time since I was a boy. Not because I was afraid of failing, but because the people who were supposed to love me had already decided I was a failure before I'd even begun. But here's what they didn't know: humiliation is a fire, and sometimes the only way to survive it is to let it burn everything weak away, until all that's left is steel. I worked 16 hours a day, slept in the shop when I couldn't afford bus fare, fixed engines with blistered hands and empty stomachs. I lost customers. I lost money. I almost lost Clara when she got sick and I couldn't afford medicine. But I never lost that fire. 10 years later, Henderson's Honest Repairs became Henderson Automotive Group, with 7 locations, over 200 employees, and a reputation that stretched across 3 states. And Thomas, he lost his job during the recession, his house, his pride. 50 years have passed since that summer day. Most of those who laughed are gone now. But the ones who remain, they remember. Because last month, Thomas came to my office, not as my brother, but as a man with nothing. He stood in the doorway, shoulders slumped, eyes red. He didn't ask for a job. He didn't ask for money. He dropped to his knees and begged. But that is a story for another time. For now, I just want you to know this: never let someone's laughter bury your dream. Because sometimes, the quietest man in the room is the one building an empire in the silence they left behind. I didn't talk to my family for almost 2 years after that day at the garage. Not because they were mad, though they were, but because they wanted to protect them. I had to keep the weak flame inside me safe from the wind of their doubt. I would tighten my grip on a wrench or scrub grease off my knuckles until my skin burned every time I thought of Thomas's laugh or my cousin's smirk. Pain became my rock. It made me remember that I was still fighting. Clara never said anything, not even once. We ate beans 3 nights in a row. Though, even when I was away fixing a bakery delivery van and getting paid in bread, she sold her wedding ring to pay the electric bill. She would look at me with those calm eyes that were the color of warm earth after rain and say, "Eddie, you're building something real. I can feel it." But real didn't pay the rent. One night in the winter, our son Michael got so sick that his lips turned blue. We didn't own a car. The closest clinic was 3 miles away. I wrapped him in all of our blankets, held him close to my chest, and walked through snow that felt like glass. My boots were falling apart. There were holes in the elbows of my coat, but I did walk. And I prayed, not to God but to the future. Let me make it. I said softly into the wind. Just let me make it long enough to give them more than this. We were able to help him in time, but that night, as I sat in a plastic chair under flickering fluorescent lights and watched Clara rock our boy to sleep, I promised myself that I would never again let my family be at the mercy of chance. I put in more effort. I began doing mobile repairs, driving my old pickup to people's homes and fixing their cars in driveways and alleys. People heard about it. They would say, "Henderson is honest. He won't lie to you." Before I even knew what a brand was, that became mine. Mrs. Langley came next. She was a widow in her 70s who lived alone in a house with peeling white paint and a garden full of roses. The Buick wouldn't start. For $20, I fixed it, which is half of what anyone else would have charged. She made me take a handwritten note that said, "God sees honest men," and a homemade apple pie. A week later, she introduced me to her nephew, who worked as a banker. He didn't care about my garage at all. He was worried about how people saw me. "People trust you," he said while we drank coffee in his office. "That's more valuable than gold." He gave me a real business loan, no security, just what I say. I almost said no. I didn't trust kindness after all that. But Clara looked me in the eye and said, "Take it. Eddie, not for you, for Michael, for the baby that's coming." That same week, we found out she was pregnant again. I bought new gear with that loan. I hired my first worker, a young boy named Javier who had been sleeping in his car. He got a key to the store and a bed in the back room. I told him, "You work hard, you eat, you lie, and you're gone." He was there for 23 years, became my right hand. I had 3 bays, a waiting room with coffee and magazines, and a line of customers every morning before the sun came up by 1975. And I still never told my family, not because I wanted to keep my success a secret, but because I wanted them to see it without me having to say anything. I wanted them to walk by my store one day, see the line of cars, see the sign with my name in big letters, and feel that little twist in their stomachs that comes when you find out you were wrong about someone. It happened sooner than I thought it would. In 1976, Thomas came by one afternoon. He was wearing a suit that didn't fit him anymore. It was too loose at the shoulders. Like he had lost weight. He stood by the door and watched me change the transmission without coming in. I didn't look up. I let the quiet go on. At last, he cleared his throat. "People say you're doing well." I used a rag to clean my hands. "I heard you lost your job at the factory." He jumped. Did not deny it. I gave him coffee. He took it. We sat in the shade on crates and drank from paper cups. He talked about bills, his wife leading, and how he felt like he had missed the boat. I heard, didn't brag, didn't help. I just listened. He said, "You were always smarter than us, Eddie." Before he left, we just didn't want to say it. I almost believed what he said, but pride is hard to get rid of. And when it's new, regret often sounds like the truth, even when it's just fear in disguise. At the time, I had no idea that this was just the start of his problems. Or that one day, decades later, he'd be on his knees in my office, crying and begging for the one thing I wasn't sure I could give: forgiveness. But at the time I thought I had won. But winning doesn't mean getting better. And the real test wasn't making the business work. It was deciding what to do when the people who hurt you come back to you, broken themselves. That lesson, it would take me my whole life to learn. There wasn't a lot of fanfare when success came. It came in slowly, like dawn, and there was no denying it. Henderson Automotive wasn't just a local name by 1980. We had opened a second and then a third store. I bought a small house on the edge of town. It wasn't fancy, but it had a yard where Michael could play and a big kitchen for Sunday dinners. Clara finally stopped counting coins at the store. She began to plant flowers again. But with success came something I wasn't ready for: being seen. People noticed how clean the store was, how well the uniforms matched, and how I shook hands without looking at my watch. They thought I had always been this way: confident, capable, and in charge. They didn't know that I spent many nights awake worrying that one bad choice would cost me everything. They had no idea that I still saved every piece of paper, used rubber gloves until they ripped, and checked my bank account 3 times a day. And they definitely didn't know about the bad dreams. I was back in that garage in 1967. But this time, the walls were closing in, the laughter was louder, and Clara and the kids were watching. Disappointed, they would say, "You promised to protect us, but you let them laugh." I never told Clara what I dreamed about. She had a lot to deal with. When our daughter Leela was born, She became a mother with a fierce tenderness that healed parts of me I didn't know were broken. She never asked for vacations or jewelry, she was happy with little things. Like Michael's first bike ride, Layla's drawings on the fridge, and the smell of bread baking on Saturday mornings. But I wanted more for them, not just safety but also legacy. So I kept getting bigger. Trainers were hired, set up apprenticeship programs for kids that schools had given up on. Made sure that every mechanic could look a customer in the eye and explain the problem in simple terms. I tell them honesty isn't just a policy, it's what makes us who we are. Then, in 1985, the phone rang. It was Thomas, not the brother I remembered, the loud, bragging man who used to brag about how good he was at business. The voice was thin and unsure. He wanted to know if we could meet. I nearly said no, but the way he spoke, like a man on the edge of a cliff, made me agree. We met at a diner that was halfway between our two towns. He looked older than he was. His hair was gray at the temples, and his hand shook around his coffee cup. He didn't beat around the bush. Things aren't going well for me, Eddie. He had borrowed money from the wrong people. It turns out, sharks that lend money. He had lost his home. His second wife had left him. He was sleeping in his car again, just like Javier had done years ago. I know I don't deserve it, he said, looking down at the table. But do you have any work? Even cleaning the floors? I looked at him, not out of pity, not with rage, with clarity. This wasn't the guy who made me laugh. Pride and bad decisions had eaten that man away. This was just a man who was broken asking for help. I could have said yes, gave him a job. I saw him put it back together. But I didn't. I said to him, I don't hire people I can't trust. He nodded, as if he knew it would happen. He got up slowly, as if his bones hurt. That's fair. I almost called him back when he walked out. Almost. But I remembered Michael, who was only 10 at the time, asking me, Dad, why doesn't Uncle Thomas come to my birthday? And I said, some people don't know how to be nice until it's too late. I told Clara everything that night. She didn't think badly of me. She took my hand and said, Eddie, you're not punishing him. You're keeping your peace safe. I still couldn't sleep. The truth was that I wanted to hurt him. A little bit. Let him feel the pain of being turned down. Like I did. That scared me more than failing ever did. It meant that the shame had not only changed me, but also hurt me. If you're not careful, scars can become chains. I began to think of forgiveness not as something I could give to others, but as something that would free me. But how do you forgive someone who never really said they were sorry? Who came back only when he had no other choice? At the time, I didn't know the answer, so I did what I knew how to do. I worked, made a Ford store, started a center for training, set up a scholarship fund for mechanics who come from families with low incomes. I told myself I was making a future, but deep down, I was still running from that Sunday in 1967, and the ghosts of laughter were always with me. Like tires on a long highway, the years went by steadily and without stopping, taking me farther away from the man I had been but never quite far enough away from the pain he had caused me. Henderson Automotive Group was written about in regional business magazines by the early 1990s. People called me the self-made mechanic who built an empire with honesty. I'd smile for the cameras, shake hands at charity events, and sign autographs for kids who wanted to be just like Mr. Henderson. But when it was quiet, after Clara had gone to bed and the last light in the house had been turned off, I would stand in front of the bathroom mirror and see not the CEO or the philanthropist, but the 32-year-old in gray-stained coveralls, alone in an empty garage while his family left. That ghost stayed there. I was able to get away from him. I got a bigger house, put Michael and Leela in private schools, gave money to every cause that asked, but no amount of giving could fill the void left by trust. I had faith in my workers, I had faith in my customers. But family, that word had turned into a locked door in my heart. Even Thomas's short, awkward calls every now and then couldn't open it back up. He'd picked up odd jobs here and there and moved from one town to another. He would sometimes send a postcard with no address on it. He'd write, doing okay, hope you are too. I'd put them away in a drawer and never answer. In 1998, Clara got sick. It started with being tired, then losing weight. The diagnosis was pancreatic cancer. The world came to a stop. None of my money, power, or connections could stop time. For weeks, I sat by her hospital bed, holding her hand and remembering all the little things we used to do together that we took for granted. The way she hummed while folding laundry, kissed my forehead before bed, and laughed when Michael told a bad joke. She looked at me with those brown eyes one night and said, "Don't let bitterness bury you after I'm gone, Eddie. You've had it long enough." I cried like a little kid. She died 3 days later. On a quiet Tuesday morning, with the sun shining on the floor and our kids holding her hands. Grief is an odd builder. It breaks down the walls you've built and makes you start over from scratch. After Clara died, I sold my shares in 2 of the stores over the next few months. Took a break from running the business every day. I started going for walks in the park every morning to feel the wind on my face and remember that life isn't just about work or proving yourself. I saw him on one of those walks. Tom. He was sitting on a bench by the duck pond, looking thinner than ever and wearing a coat that looked 2 sizes too big. His hair was almost white by now. At first, he didn't see me. He was slowly and carefully feeding the birds breadcrumbs. He had a quiet dignity that I hadn't seen before. Like a tired Grace, I could have turned around and left. But something made Clara's voice in my head, or maybe the ghost in the mirror finally getting tired, made me sit next to him. He looked up, shocked. Then he looked like he knew what was going on. "Eddie, Thomas, we didn't talk for a long time. I just saw the ducks glide across the water." He finally said, "I heard about Clara. I'm sorry." His voice broke. "Not for show, real, raw." I nodded. "Thanks." He said he lived in a small apartment over a laundromat. Part-time job at a hardware store. No wife, no kids called. Only him and his regrets. I used to think that being successful meant having more than everyone else. He said as he threw away the last piece of bread. "Now I think it's about having someone who stays." I thought about Clara. Of her hands in my hands. Of how she never needed me to be rich. She just needed me to be there. I didn't give him a job that day. I didn't give him any money. But I gave him something that was harder to give: my time. After that, we met every Sunday. 2 old brothers sat on a bench and talked about nothing and everything, things from their childhood. The weather, and how the city had changed. That day in 1967. He never said he was sorry. Maybe he didn't know how to do it. Or maybe he knew that words wouldn't be enough. But he did come. Over and over, and slowly, without either of us knowing it. The door in my heart that was locked began to creak open. Then there was the 2008 recession. It hurt a lot, even for us. We had to shut down one place. Fire good workers. I was 73 years old. And for the first time in decades, I felt the old fear of losing everything come back. Thomas called me the night I signed the papers to close. I heard he said, "If you need someone to keep an eye on the phones." I'm not much, but I'm here. I almost said no because I'm used to it. But then I heard Clara's voice again: "Don't let bitterness bury you." So I agreed. He began the next week, not as a boss. Not like family, just like Thomas, who made coffee and answered the phone. He worked hard and quietly, never asked for anything else. And for the first time in 50 years, I stopped seeing him as the man who embarrassed me and started seeing him as the man who was trying to be someone who deserved forgiveness at the end of his life. But life, as it always does, had one more surprise in store. Because Thomas fell down in the store 3 years ago. Failure of the heart. He made it, but just barely. When he woke up in the hospital, the first thing he said to me wasn't "thank you, I'm sorry." Not for the work, not for the cash, for that day in 1967. For laughing, for having doubts, for making me feel like I wasn't good enough. And at that moment, standing by his hospital bed and watching this broken man finally tell the truth, I understood something. It wasn't about him deserving forgiveness. It was about me being free. I held his hand, just like I had Clara's, and said, "It's okay, brother. We have both wasted too much time already." But that forgiveness, it would be tested in ways I never thought possible. Thomas came to my office last month not as a brother or an employee, but as a man who was desperate and had nothing left. And this time he didn't just want a job. It was all of it. It was a Tuesday morning in late October. The rain softly tapped against the windows of my office. I had moved into this office in 1989, and it had the oak desk Clara chose and a framed picture of our kids on their first day of school. I was going over quarterly reports, but at the age of 83, I mostly just signed papers and gave advice. The real work was now in the hands of younger people. Michael ran operations and Leela ran community outreach. I was the figurehead, the quiet person in the background. Then Thomas came in. Not the Thomas who had been working at the store for the past 10 years. He was always on time, steady and reliable. This was a different person. He had clean clothes, but his eyes were empty. He didn't shave. As he closed the door behind him, his hand shook. He didn't sit down. He was standing there, breathing like he had just run a mile. And then out of nowhere he fell to his knees. I stopped. He whispered, Eddie, his voice breaking, please. My chair scraped the floor when I stood up. Get up, Thomas. No, he said, and tears ran down his face. Not until you hear me. And then he said, his only grandson, a boy named Daniel, had been accepted to MIT, a full scholarship. Engineering. The child was very smart, just like Michael had been. But there was a catch: the scholarship only paid for tuition, not housing, books, or the flight to Boston. And Thomas had told him he would pay for the rest. But he wasn't able to. He had used up all of his savings to pay off old medical bills. The hardware store had cut back on his hours. He'd sold his car, his watch, and even the old teapot I gave him years ago. Not enough yet. I told him I'd find a way, Thomas said, his voice breaking, but I don't have a way, not anymore. He looked up at me then, not with pride or hope, but with the raw, shaky hope of a man who had nothing left to give but his shame. I know I don't have the right to ask you for anything. I wouldn't blame you if you turned me down after everything I did and how I treated you. He swallowed hard. But Daniel, he's not guilty. He has a chance that I never gave myself. And if I let him down, his voice broke down completely. I'll never forgive myself. There was silence in the room. I looked at my brother, the man who had once laughed at me and now knelt in front of me with tears in his eyes. The same hands that had pointed at my dream in a mocking way now held onto the hem of his coat like it was a lifeline. 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind. This is manipulation. He's using a kid to get to me. He still doesn't get what true humility is after all this time. Why do I have to pay for his mistakes? But then I thought of Daniel's face. Not because I had met him, I hadn't, but because I remembered being him. That poor, wide-eyed kid with a dream that was too big for his life. The one who stood in a garage full of people who didn't believe and still did. Clara's voice came back to me, soft but firm. Don't let bitterness bury you. I slowly walked around the desk. My knees hurt, but I knelt next to him. Not over him, next to him. Thomas, look at me. He did. He was ashamed, scared, and had red eyes. I told him, I'm not giving you the money. His face fell, but I'm giving it to Daniel. His face showed both relief and confusion. I'll pay for his first year of school, including housing, books, and travel. Everything. I stopped. But only if. He nodded quickly. Anything. You don't tell him where it came from. Not yet. You can let him think it was a grant, a loan, a miracle, or anything else you want. But not me. Why? He said, confused. I said softly, this isn't about you earning my forgiveness. This is his chance. And if he knows it came from me, he'll have to deal with our past before he even has a chance to write his own story. Thomas looked at me with tears streaming down his face. Then he reached out and gripped my hand, his skin thin, his grip surprisingly strong. He said, thank you, with a lot of emotion. I don't know how to pay you back. You already have. I said, by being there, by getting down on one knee, by finally seeing me as the man I became despite you, not as the little brother you made fun of. We stayed like that for a long time. Two old men on a worn carpet, the pain and silence of decades fading in the light of the rain. I sent the money later that week. From a distance I saw Thomas tell Daniel the good news. Saw the boy's face light up with that pure, unburdened joy that only young people can feel when the future suddenly opens up for them. I didn't go to the dinner to say goodbye, didn't say goodbye with a hug. But I stood on my porch and watched Thomas help Daniel load his suitcase into a borrowed car the morning he left for the airport. Thomas didn't wave when he saw me. He just put a hand on his heart and nodded. That night, for the first time in years, I didn't see the ghost in the mirror. I saw an old man who had finally stopped running. But I've learned that peace never lasts. I got a call from the hospital just last week. Thomas is sick again. This time it's worse. And Daniel. I just got a call from Daniel. He said Grandpa told me everything. About you. About the cash. About the garage. He paused. Then they asked me the one question I've been trying to avoid my whole life. Why did you help us after all that? And now, at 83, with winter coming and my bones heavy with time, I need to find an answer, not just for him but for the boy I used to be. Some stories shouldn't end with revenge. They should end with grace. I didn't respond to Daniel right away. I told him I needed some time to think. For the first time in years I went to the attic. It was the only room in the house that Clara and I never cleaned out. Dust hung in the air like memories that had been frozen in time. There were boxes on the walls that said things like Michael's school projects, Lella's art, and Christmas 1978. I found it in the far corner, under a faded quilt, a little wooden chest. There were things in there that I hadn't seen in 50 years. My first Mihanes license, a picture of my dad, the only one I had, and an envelope that was yellowed and had no stamp or address. I wrote for Thomas in my own shaky hand. I wrote it the night after he made fun of me in the garage. I wrote down all of my pain, confusion, and hurt pride on those pages. Gave him names, said I would never forgive him. I promised him that he would regret it. I never sent it, could not, even when I was angry. I knew that burning bridges wouldn't help me build my future. It would just leave me alone on the other side. I learned something new when I held that letter. Forgiveness doesn't mean not feeling pain. You can choose to stop letting pain write your story. I sat on an old trunk and called Daniel back. He picked up on the first ring. Mr. Henderson. Just call me Eddie. I said, or Grandpa if that feels right. A break, then. In a soft voice, okay, Grandpa. I took a deep breath. You wanted to know why I helped you after all that? The truth is that I helped you because I saw myself in you. Thomas made those mistakes, not you, but in your hope, because you want to rise. I told him what was in the garage, about the laughing, about walking through the snow with Michael in my arms, about making something not to show them they were wrong, but to show myself that I deserved more. And what about your grandfather? I said it. He spent most of his life trying to get away from his own shame. But in the end, he chose to kneel, not to beg for himself, but to fight for you. That took guts, more than I did when I was his age. For a long time, Daniel didn't say anything. After that, he said, he's not going to make it, is he? We both knew what the doctors had said without saying it. The heart wasn't strong enough. The body is too tired, I said. No, but he's at peace. That's because of you, Daniel. You gave him a reason to be proud before the end. We talked for more than an hour about MIT, engines, and the kind of person he wanted to be. He wanted to know about Clara, about the principles that made our business, about whether being successful is worth the times when it makes you feel lonely. I told him you don't have to choose. Success without kindness is just noise. But kindness with a goal, that's what legacy is. I didn't go back downstairs after we hung up. I stayed in the attic with that letter that I didn't send. Then I slowly ripped it up and let the pieces fall into a metal bucket. I lit a match, saw the flames take away the anger of a younger man. I drove to the hospital the next day. Thomas was asleep. Pale but calm, I sat next to him and held his hand. The same hand that had once pointed at me in mockery. It was weak and cool against my palm. He woke up an hour later. Gave a weak smile. Daniel called you. I talked to him. I said, he knows everything. He does. Thomas shut his eyes again. I'm sorry, Eddie, for everything. I know, I said, and I forgive you. He was surprised when he opened his eyes. Just like that? I said softly, not like that. It took 50 years, but yes. Just like this. He squeezed my hand lightly. You were always the better man. I said no. I was the only one who wouldn't let their worst moment define my best. He fell asleep again, breathing slowly and steadily. I stayed until the sun went down. That night I called Leela and Michael. I told them what I was going to do. They didn't think twice. 2 days later, my kids, Daniel, and I were all in Thomas's hospital room. Daniel had flown back from Boston just to be there. Thomas didn't say much, but his eyes followed Daniel like a prayer. Daniel stepped forward when the nurse asked if we wanted to say anything before they moved him to palliative care. He didn't talk. He took Thomas's hand, leaned down, and whispered, Grandpa, I got into the honors program for engineering. I'm going to name my first invention after you. Thomas smiled a real, full smile and said, Thank you, Eddie. Daniel looked at me with tears in his eyes. He already knows. 3 nights later, Thomas died peacefully, with the window open and the sound of rain outside. I didn't stand out at the funeral. I stood next to Daniel with my arm around his shoulders, as if he had always been mine. He then asked if he could stay with me for the summer. He said, I want to learn from you, not just about cars, about how to live. I said yes, because the circle wasn't closing. It was starting up again, and this time, it would be built on healing instead of shame. The first week of June, Daniel moved into the guest room. He brought 2 suitcases, a laptop, and a sketchbook full of designs for electric engines that looked like something out of a science fiction book. At first, he was quiet and polite. He always asked before he touched anything. But after a few days, the house started to breathe again. I didn't know how quiet it had gotten since Clara died. How the rooms echoed with emptiness. But Daniel brought them to life. Not with noise but with his presence. He would make coffee in the morning and leave a cup on my desk. In the evenings, he would sit on the porch swing and draw while I told him stories about the past, the real ones. Not the polished ones from interviews. One afternoon, while we were in the garage, the original one, which is now a sort of museum, he pointed to a wrench that was hanging on the wall and was rusty. That's the one you used when they made fun of you, right? I nodded. Still works. He handled it with care as if it were holy. Why keep it? Because tools don't remember shame, I said. They only remember what you make with them. He looked at me then like a builder looks at another builder. Not like a grandson looks at a grandfather. He said, I want to make something that lasts. Not just machines, something that is good for people. At that point, I knew Clara's spirit was still with us. That softness, that quiet desire to make the world a better place, she hadn't lost it. It was just waiting for someone to take it to the next level. I began to take him to the stores, but not as a customer, as an apprentice, not to learn how to fix cars, but how to look at people. Keep an eye on their hands, I told him as we stood behind the counter. If they're shaking, they're scared. Maybe they can't pay for the repair. If they won't look you in the eye, it's because they've been cheated before. You have more to do than just fix the car. It's to win back their trust. He paid attention, listened carefully. One day a woman who was a single mother came in with a minivan that wouldn't start. She said she had 2 jobs, and if the van didn't work, she'd lose both of them. The diagnosis was bad, the alternator was fried. The belts were worn out, and the radiator was cracked. At least $800. She got pale. I'll come up with something. Daniel stepped forward before I could say anything. Ma'am, what if we fix the alternator today for free and you pay us back $20 a week? Not interested. Just when you can. She started to cry. I took him aside later. You didn't check that with me. I know, he said, but you taught me that being honest isn't just about parts. It's about being human. I stared at him for a long time. After that I smiled. Welcome to the family business, son. He stopped moving. You mean that? I've meant it since you called me grandpa. He asked me something that surprised me while we were eating dinner that night. Do you ever wish you could be angry again? I gave it some thought. Anger kept me going when I had nothing else. But peace. Peace lets me live. There is a difference. He nodded slowly. I was so angry with my dad for leaving, for making grandpa's life hard. But when I watch you, you don't seem to carry that weight. How? I learned that holding on to anger is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. I said, Thomas had enough pain, and I wouldn't let his mistakes take away my happiness. Daniel didn't say anything for a while. Then he said, I believe I'm ready to forgive my father. I reached across the table and held his hand. Then do it. Not for him, for you. As summer went on, our relationship grew stronger. He helped me turn old customer records into digital files. I showed him how to fix a carburetor by hand. We had a fight about whether electric cars or classic cars are better. He said I was out of date. I told him he was impatient. We laughed more than I had in a long time. One night, as fireflies blinked in the yard, he turned to me and said, You know, I think Grandpa always knew that you would be the one to save me. I stared at the stars. Maybe. Or maybe he just finally trusted someone enough to ask for help. We really did save each other. He gave me more than just memories. And I gave him a place to grow. But as summer came to an end, life threw us one last test that would make Daniel choose between the future he had always wanted and the family he had just met. It took place in late August. Daniel was at the kitchen table with his laptop open. The screen's light lit up his face. I saw that his shoulders were tense while I was pouring myself a glass of iced tea. Is everything okay? I asked. He didn't answer right away. He just looked at the email like it might bite him. Then he turned the screen so I could see it. The Office of Innovation at MIT sent it. They had looked over his prototype, which was a modular electric motor made for poor neighborhoods, and wanted to get it into their incubator program as soon as possible. Complete funding. Getting help from the best engineers, the chance to start his own business before he graduated. The catch was that he had to move to Boston for good in 2 weeks. No option for remote work, no waiting. This is everything I've worked for, he said, his voice tight, but he didn't finish it. He didn't need to. I took a seat across from him. But you don't want to go. He looked out the window at the garage. The old oak tree Clara and I planted when Michael was born. And the quiet street where Thomas used to sit on the bench. He whispered, I just found you, and now I have to leave? I reached across the table and gently closed the laptop. Daniel, pay attention to me. You don't have to give me your life. You owe your future to yourself. But what if I lose this? He asked, his eyes shining. What if I go there and fail? At least here, I have you, I said firmly. You'll always have me. Distance doesn't break real connections, fear does. For a long time he didn't say anything. Then what if I stay? What if I make something here with you? I shook my head. This isn't about me. It's about the boy in the garage who had a dream that no one else could see. You are that boy now, and Boston isn't running away from us. It's calling you to become who you're meant to be. He used the back of his hand to wipe his eyes. It just feels like I'm leaving you, I said. You're not. You are honoring everything we've worked for, all the lessons, all the tears, and all the late nights in that garage were all leading up to this moment. Don't waste it because you feel bad. He nodded slowly, but the pain in his eyes didn't go away. The next few days were both good and bad. He packed with quiet determination. But he stayed in each room for a long time, as if he were memorizing it. He took pictures of the porch swing, the garage, and my old toolbox. We sat outside under the stars on his last night, just like we had weeks before. He said, I'll be back, every holiday, all summer long. I said, you better, trying to sound strict but failing. Someone needs to stop me from turning this place into a dump. He laughed, but it wasn't very strong. Then he got serious. Grandpa, what if I need you? Really need you? I said. Then you call, day or night, no matter what the weather is like. I'm going to be here. He hugged me then, hard, like he was trying to push my heart into his bones. I stood on the porch and watched his taxi drive away that morning. I hadn't felt pain in my chest like this since Claire died. But there was something else under the pain. Pride. He was in the air. And this time I wasn't the one who got left behind. I was the wind that lifted him up. The house felt too quiet again for weeks after that. But I didn't let myself get too lonely. I started helping kids at the community center. Taught them how to check tire pressure, change oil, and talk with confidence. Daniel sent me a text every few days with pictures of his dorm, sketches of new designs, and complaints about the winters in Boston. Then on a rainy afternoon in October my phone rang. Daniel was the one. But his voice didn't sound excited, tired, or homesick. It was afraid. He said, Grandpa, in a voice that was barely above a whisper. I think I messed up. I recognized that tone. It was the same one I used to call Clara from the garage in 1967. When I was feeling defeated, I said, tell me, as I slowly sat down in my old chair. Daniel took a shaky breath. The incubator, it's not what I thought it would be. They want to patent the main design and then sell it to a big car company. Take out the part about being affordable, make it a luxury extra. I shut my eyes. Of course they did. That's how the world works. Turn purpose into money and soul into stock. They said if I don't agree, they'll cut funding, he went on. And I can't stay in the program without it. I'm going to lose my home, my visa, everything. There was silence between us, with only the sound of rain hitting the roof. Do you still believe in what you said? Finally I asked. Yes, he said without thinking, more than ever. Then leave. What? Let them if they want to mess up your vision. But don't let them change you. But Grandpa, Daniel, listen to me. With just $23 and a prayer, I built my first store. You have something I don't. A great mind, a proven design, and a group of people who believe in you, including me. You don't need their permission to make the world a better place. You just need the guts to do it your way. For a long time, he didn't say anything. Then I'm scared. Okay, I said, fear means you care. But don't let it drive. We talked for more than an hour. He had made up his mind by the end. He would turn down their offer. Get out of the incubator. But he didn't know what would happen next. Come home, I said. Really, for as long as you need. You own the garage, you own the tools, and all the money I've saved. Take it, it's yours if you use it to build something real. He cried at that point, not because they were sad but because they were relieved from being looked at. 3 days later, he flew back. I met him at the airport with a thermos of coffee and the old pickup truck he helped me fix up that summer. I didn't have a sign. He held me so tightly that I thought my ribs would break. We didn't talk about failure when we got back to the house. We talked about the base. That night, we cleaned out the back room of the old garage. It was dusty, forgotten, and full of old parts. We cleaned the floor, hung up lights, and put together a workbench. It was born again by Don Henderson's Sun Innovations. I didn't give him money right away. I told him to do something hard. Make a prototype that costs less than $500 to make. Anyone with basic tools should be able to fix it. And make it so good that people will choose it over the expensive stuff. He got really into it, slept in a cot in the garage, had sandwiches with peanut butter. He called engineers he had met online. He tested materials until his hands were sore. I watched him, not to judge, but to see. He was soldering a circuit board one night under a flickering lamp when he looked up and said, "You know, this feels more like success than MIT ever did." I said, "Because this is yours, not theirs." 2 months later, he had a small, modular electric motor that could power anything from a rickshaw in Mumbai to a delivery bike in Chicago. Lasts a long time, not too expensive, able to be fixed. We named it the Phoenix. Now came the hard part, getting people to see it. I used all of my contacts, like old customers, retired mechanics, and community leaders. We set up demos at stores in the area. Gave units to farmers, food delivery drivers, and nonprofits. People heard about it. Then, a video of a single mother in Detroit using the Phoenix to keep her food truck going went viral. There were a lot of orders, not from companies but from people. A writer called it the anti-tech revolution, but the real test came when a big car company offered to buy the patent for $10 million. Daniel came to me confused. "Grandpa, it's money that will change your life. We could put up a factory, hire a lot of people, scale quickly, and lose control of your mission," I said softly. "But what if this is the only way to get to millions?" I looked at him. The same eyes that had begged me for help months ago were now full of purpose. "Then don't sell the patent. Give it a license. Keep your property. Make the rules. Make them agree to your terms, no price gouging. Open repair manuals and putting profits back into communities that need it." He looked at me. "They'll never agree." "Then they don't deserve your idea." He thought about it for a week. Then he called the company back. Not to accept, but to talk about it. He was shocked when they said yes. Not because they cared, but because the public pressure was too strong to ignore. 6 months later, the Phoenix launched all over the world. Daniel stood at the podium during the press conference. Calm and clear, reporters wanted to know how a kid with no support did it. He looked right into the camera and said, "I had one thing they couldn't buy, a grandfather who taught me that integrity isn't a cost. It's the foundation." We sat on the porch again that night. "You did it," I said. "No," he said with a smile. "We did," and at that moment I finally got the whole circle. Thomas had hurt me, but Daniel had made us both better. Still, peace is never the end of the story. A letter came from a small village in Kenya last week. A teacher wrote to say thank you because the Phoenix was running their school's computer lab. For the first time, kids there could dream about things that were far away. And one boy had written at the bottom in careful English, "I want to be like Mr. Henderson. I will make things that are useful to people." Daniel read it 2 times. Then he looked at me with bright eyes. He asked, "What do you say, Grandpa, should we make a scholarship?" I smiled. "Let's make a school." The school didn't just happen. It took 2 years, a lot of money, permits, late-night calls with engineers in Nairobi, and more than a few fights about whether solar panels or wind turbines would work better in the highlands. But Daniel never changed his mind. He built the whole campus himself, including classrooms with open walls for airflow, a workshop that ran entirely on Phoenix units, and even a small dormitory for students who walked miles to get there. Not only did I pay for it, I left. I stood on red earth under an African sky with Daniel's arm in one hand and a cane in the other. I watched kids run their fingers over the first engine they had ever seen that didn't roar like a beast but hummed like a lullaby. A boy, who couldn't have been more than 10, looked up at me with wide eyes and asked, "Did you make this?" I knelt down slowly and painfully and shook my head. "No, son, I just thought it was possible." "He made it." I pointed to Daniel, who was teaching a group of girls how to change a coil. The boy looked unhappy. "But you're getting old. Why do you want to help us?" I smiled, because a long time ago someone laughed at me for having big dreams. I promised myself that if I ever got the chance, I would make sure that no child ever felt too small to dream again. He didn't get it all, but he nodded, as if he knew what I was saying. Daniel and I sat on the porch of the guest house the village had built for us that night. The sky was full of stars. The crickets sang. The drums in the distance thumped like a heartbeat. He said softly, "You know, Grandpa, Thomas would be proud." I could see the school in the moonlight. He'd be very proud. He would be saved. This was more than just a school, a motor, or a business. It was a second chance. Thomas spent his whole life not trusting other people until he learned to trust one boy. For me, who wore bitterness like armor until I realized it was just another prison. Daniel could have chosen fame and fortune, but he chose purpose instead. Something had changed when we got home. I stopped thinking of myself as the man who was ashamed. I thought of myself as the man who made pain into a way for other people to get through it. Daniel did not return to Boston. He started the Phoenix Initiative, which is a global network of workshops where young people from poor areas can learn how to build, fix, and come up with new ideas with respect. He goes around the world now, but he always comes back home. He comes over every Sunday without fail to eat Clara's old pancake recipe and tell me about a girl in Manila who built a water purifier out of junk, or a boy in Rio who powered his whole block during a blackout. Last month, on my 86th birthday, he gave me a small box. It had a key inside, but not for a car. It was for the first U.S. Phoenix Training Center, which will open in our hometown next spring. He said, and this, putting a second key next to it, is for your office. You are the honorary dean. I cried and laughed at the same time. I can hardly walk up the stairs. He said, you won't have to. We made the elevator just for you. As I sit here writing this, not for fame, not for pity, but for anyone who's ever been told they're not in ca, I want you to know one thing: your humiliation is not the end. It's your turn to invite, an invitation to go deeper, to get up more quietly. Don't build for revenge, build for those who will come after you. Thomas is no longer here. Clara is no longer here, but their stories live on. Not in monuments, but in moments. In a Kenyan boy turning a wrench. In Detroit, a single mother is keeping her business going. In Daniel's hands, steady and sure, teaching the next generation that being honest isn't old-fashioned. It's revolutionary. And what about me? I'm still here, not like the man they made fun of, but as the man who made sure their laughter never stopped another dream. So if you're watching this and you've been hurt, doubted, or thrown away, don't waste your time making them feel bad about it. Make something that is so beautiful, so useful, and so full of light. That day, they'll kneel not because they're ashamed, but out of awe, and you will lift them up. That's what legacy really is, not strength, not money, but you have the strength to turn your pain into wings and let someone else fly them.